it's not just that we're solving a problem of world hunger, right? We're getting more specific than that, which is to say that we want to solve hunger in the panhandle of Texas. The point of this isn't to just develop code that does a thing.
Right.
It's to develop code that solves a problem for somebody, and for somebody that the government's decided that they care enough about to enter into a contract here.
Welcome to the Contract Teardown Show from Law Insider, where legal experts tear down contracts from some of the most well-known companies and high-profile executives around the world.
In this episode, John Grant, a consultant known as the Agile Attorney, walks us through an Agile software development agreement. This one comes from 18F, the hiring agency for government services software in the United States. You'll learn how Agile contracts differ from traditional development agreements, as well as how you can draft to prioritize speed while still defining important limits. So, let's tear it down. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Contract Teardown Show. I'm Mike Whalen. The purpose of this show is what the name sounds like. We take contracts and we beat them up using smart friends like my buddy over here. Everything's backwards on this recording thing. My buddy over here, John Grant. John, how are you today?
I am good. So does that mean you're here? Okay. Oh, I did.
I know, right? Everything's backwards. I do have to give you guys, just by word of warning, we're recording middle of the day during COVID, which means kids and birds. We have this new bird that we just got who says, what the F word? And so if you suddenly hear, if this has an E rating next to it, it's not my fault, okay? It's the bird's fault. John, you and I are going to be talking about a particular document that is super weird. This is sort of a special edition episode over here. It's this document. It's titled Blank Program Statement of Objectives for Blank Product. As you guys can see, this is not a finished document. We're going to go through this step by step. But John, what is this document?
Yeah, so this document comes from an entity called 18F, which is an address. I don't remember exactly what, but it is basically has to do with the Government Services Agency, right, which is the contracting arm of the federal government. And the first version of this document came into existence, probably about 10, maybe 12 years ago, in the early days of the Obama administration, because what they realized when they came into executive power was that all of the government contract templates were built around this assumption of a particular form of project management, which used to just be known as project management, is now sort of known as either traditional or waterfall project management. However, the problem they ran into was that software vendors and technology companies had adopted an entirely new and different form of project management known as Agile. And so this is actually the Agile contract format for this particular document. And I think this one might be an RFP type contract. But what is interesting about it is the first instances of there being a contract template, and obviously it's evolved since 12 years ago. But it's the first instance of a government contract template specifically geared towards the Agile project management methodology.
So looking at this document again, if I'm understanding correctly, the purpose in this thing is essentially if you are a lawyer and you're going to work with software development companies, you got to know something about Agile. And here is a document that sort of the government is saying, you got to sprechen this language. That was the closest to German I could get. And this is the document that we're going to use as an example to tell you how this sort of thinking works. So, John, why are you here? What do you know about this Agile thing? What's your background?
Yeah. Well, so I claimed the moniker, the Agile Attorney, right? And
the domain was there. Somebody's got to get it.
It was there. Yeah. It was not because I was a high school pole vaulter, although that is true. It is because I learned about the Agile methodology. And I, maybe not unique among lawyers, but I had about a 10-year career in the technology industry before I went to law school. And interestingly enough, the company I worked for was kind of proto-agile at the time, right? I left them in the year 2002. The Agile Manifesto, and yes, there is a manifesto, was the year 2000, I believe. So we were doing some things that were agile-like. But then after law school, I went back and was in-house counsel at that same company, and they had gone completely agile while I was away. Right, I'm learning about the rule against perpetuities. They're revolutionizing the way that software gets developed, and it was better. So I remember, like, once I got back and was, spending time obviously learning how to be a lawyer, but also with a lot of friends and colleagues and contacts that were still in sort of the delivery part of that company, and I was learning about Agile, and I'm like, wow, this really is better. It's faster, it's less contentious. They seem to be delivering more often. I wonder if this could work for lawyers, right? I had this thought in my head, but I was so busy at the time, like, learning how to be a lawyer, that I didn't get to bottom it out until a few years later, right? So really, for the last 8-9 years, I've been sort of very specifically looking at ways that lawyers and legal teams can adopt Agile methodologies, not just to know them for the clients that they serve, but to actually use them in their own practices. And I've been doing it full time now for about 3 years.
And anybody who, like John Grant, uses the phrase proto-agile in a sentence, they're cool enough to talk about this stuff. So what we're going to do now, John, is we're going to dig into this document. So am I right that the triggering event for this particular document is a government agency is going to hire a software development company, and this is the document they're going to use for that engagement? Is that right?
You got it. Yeah. And actually, I think this particular document is part of the RFP process to bring those in. And it's basically getting the government agency to do some pre-planning, but these terms will eventually become part of the contract with that software company.
All right. And with the caveat that, our intention here is not to be an encyclopedia of terms. There are certain terms that, if you're not used to this Agile context, then you're going to have to know those to figure out how you deal with these kinds of contracts. Contracts in general are just trying to define scope and exchanges. This is just doing the same thing with some kind of flexibility. So we're going to start, John, with this section 1.2 on the problem. The government says that this is the software product or service will be developed to solve a problem on behalf of users. So give us that summary. Talk to me about this section 1.2. What's its purpose? If I'm drafting, how do I make sure that I add the right kind of problem language in here?
Yeah, so that's just it, right? And in a traditional contract, that would be the domain of the italicized whereases at the very beginning. Right. And you'd be forced to try to sort of find some thread of, like, what the heck are we doing here? And basically what 18F said is, enough with all that. Let's actually be really clear that we aren't just building software for the sake of building software, people for the sake of government handouts, right? We actually want to solve a problem. And so let's be really express and explicit about how we define what that problem looks like to us, right? And in this particular document, I think it's meant to be a starting point for some conversation back and forth with the potential vendors. But it really does elevate this idea of, okay, there's a problem and what we're buying is a solution to the problem. Code is just the tool, right? Software is the vehicle through which the solution is going to be delivered. But what we're trying to do is solve a problem first and foremost, right? And that's sort of the first of many sort of mind shift changes that I think are good ones, right? And frankly, good practice to get into for contracting in general. And some lawyers are doing more and more of that, I think, out in the world.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike Whalen. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Contract Teardown Show. Real quick, I want to ask you to do me/you really a quick favor. Look down below. You'll see a discount code to join the Law Insider Premium subscription. When you do that, you get access to more content like this. You'll see webinars, daily tips on contract drafting, not to mention access to the world's largest database of sample contracts and clauses. It will help you write better contracts faster. If you want to do it right now, there's a code below, so get there. Also, if you're part of a larger team, if you're in-house or in a law firm, just email us. We're at sales@lawinsider.com. We'll make sure you get a deal as well. Come join us in the community. The code is below. Let's get back to the show. So we're like, normally, if I'm doing a contract for purchase of goods or whatever, I'm saying I'm going to buy 30 widgets, and here's on the thing, you're going to get 30 widgets delivered by this date. It sounds like what this thing is saying, this section is saying, is this isn't so much about widgets. This is, we got an issue. You got some people who are going to work on the issue. Let's talk about what that issue is, because that's what's defining the scope. Is that?
You got it right. Okay. And with software, software isn't a widget, right? I mean, you know, there might be components or whatever that are plug and play that are widget like, but again, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is accomplish some need or solve some problem in a way that is either new or better than the solutions we already have.
Right. So at the risk of Solve World Hunger being the title line, we're going to jump down to 2.1 that's titled Product Vision. And and this section, you know, seems to dig a little deeper. It says the government says you want to consider who is affected, what is the problem, how are we helping, what is the outcome. So this is starting to move from we've got this very broad problem to let's talk about at least a vague idea of what a solution would be that you're going to work on.
Yeah, and you hit on the key word, which is who, right? So it's not just that we're solving a problem of world hunger, right? We're getting more specific than that, which is to say that we want to solve hunger in the panhandle of Texas, right? Or and that might be too narrow, right, for broad government, but we want to solve hunger across this particular population or across this income band or in this geographic area. But it's really getting to who are the people that we're solving this problem for, right? And getting to that with some specificity, because again, the point of this isn't to just develop code that does a thing.
Right.
It's to develop code that solves a problem for somebody, and for somebody that the government's decided that they care enough about to enter into a contract here.
I know all of the lawyers who are listening to this are like, this is some frou-frou nonsense. Where are the numbers? So I'm looking down at 2.2 because it talks about this defining the period of performance, the budget, the ceiling price. How would a lawyer address this kind of section that says, yes, we got this big thing that we're dealing with, but man, you know, solving world hunger is expensive. So let's draw a line somewhere.
Yeah. And so this actually gets to really one of the I think biggest differences between traditional waterfall project management and agile project management. And to understand the difference, I got to give you a little bit of project management 101. So when I first worked in the software world, they sent me to like a little project management couple-day training. And what I learned then, that nobody who goes to law school seems to learn, but is true, right, is that there is what's called the iron triangle of project management. So, you know, think a triangle, right? It goes three corners. And at one corner is time, right, or duration. At another corner is scope, right? What are the things that we're trying to do in the project? And at the third corner is resources, right? Which is often human power, number of people, but it could be money, it could be tools and all the rest. And the reason it's called the iron triangle of project management is that if one of those things changes, then at least one, if not both of the other, are going to change as well, right? So, and probably the place where maybe people have encountered this in the real world is at their car mechanic or at the backwoods general store when they're on a road trip, and there's a cute little sign that says good, fast, or cheap, pick two, right? And most of us have seen that in the wild. That's basically the iron triangle of project management in action. So with waterfall, traditional project management, it assumes that the most important thing is the scope, right? And so the contract spends a lot of time defining what are all the things that are going to be delivered within this project. Right. And then it also wants to say that, okay, we're going to have a timeline and we're going to have a budget. But if one of those things winds up being wrong, then oftentimes the thing that will float is going to be either the time or the budget or both, because we want all these things. The scope is the most important thing, which means if surprises come up along the way, which they inevitably do, right? That is just the laws of project management, is that it's going to take longer and be more expensive to execute a fixed piece of scope than you thought. So that's traditional, right? And the problem, right? And the whole reason that Agile came to be to begin with was this basically recognition that all software projects were delivered late and over budget. And the developers really didn't like being accused of being the root of those problems. It was easy for the business owners to finger point. And so the developers, the software people, came up with this Agile methodology that said, hey, I'll tell you what, we're going to commit to a fixed period of time and a relatively fixed budget, right? So you're going to pay us X amount of dollars over the next 6 weeks. And you're going to tell us all the things that you think you want, but you're going to have to rank them, right? We're going to prioritize them. And we will deliver as many of the scope items as we can in that fixed time period. And actually 6 weeks is long for an Agile project. They're usually between 1 and 3. But we're going to deliver as many of these scope items as we can, but you're going to be 100% sure that the budget is fixed and that the time period is fixed. And then at the end of it, we're going to get back together and we're going to review what we've learned. So what did we deliver? Did it meet your expectations? Did it solve the small p problem that you were trying to solve with this particular iteration? And then we're going to get back together and say, okay, let's do this for another 3 weeks. With a fixed budget and that fixed time period, and we'll knock off the next few items of scope, right? And the idea is by basically breaking the time scale down into these very rapid iterations. And this is not all Agile. This is the specific sort of flavor of Agile known as Scrum, but it is the most common form of Agile. And it's this idea that, again, you're having these iterative things. So
like I'm thinking about, a traditional sort of contract environment in which you say, I'm going to do X and you're going to do Y or whatever, and here's this amount of time. And something happens, because something always happens, like you said. You submit a change order, and now we're renegotiating a new document anyway because it's got some kind of changes that everybody's got to compensate for. Is this kind of document designed to give you the flexibility so you don't do change orders, or is it these iterations are sort of like change orders?
I would say I think that's a good question. So one way to answer it is that there are no change orders, because you're basically breaking off such small chunks and you're delivering it so frequently that, frankly, by the time you could spin up a change order, that particular sprint is going to be done, right? So it's basically saying, okay, since everything seemed to wind up in change orders anyway, we're just going to plan to have a new change order every 3 weeks, right? Or sometimes every week, right? And it's this idea, and I don't think we've hit on it yet, but two more weird words that are going to come up is that we will create a backlog of user stories, right? And the backlog is basically, this is all the this is our wish list. These are all the things we think we want. But again, we're going to have to prioritize them. We're going to have to say, okay.
That's down in 3.1, and here's the language the government says. In guidance for this, they say, include the draft product backlog of user stories. In some instances, epics were more appropriate for capturing the agency need. What?
The epic. Okay, so right, there's a lot in there. So let me start with what's a user story. Right. So because again, this is sort of different, right? In a traditional contract, you would say, okay, I need a widget, right? I need a unit of whatever. And in Agile project management, and especially in Agile software development, the unit is the user story, and oh, by the way, it's not especially measurable. So what a user story is a very sort of specific sort of Mad Lib TM that basically frames a problem in a particular format, and it goes like this: as a blank, I need to be able to blank so that I can blank, right? So as a user, right, as a particular person in a population, sometimes as a particular person in a population wearing a certain hat, right? So But it's getting as specific as you can with who the person is or the population is that you're trying to solve the problem for. That's part one. Then I need to be able to blank, which is do a thing, right? I need to be able to, I don't know, find what the interest rate is on the 10-year T-note, right? Or some other, that's the most governmental thing I can think of off the top of my head right now. Or, maybe find out whether I'm eligible for a PPP loan, right? So that I can blank as the third part. And that's the part that is often missed in traditional contracting, which is like, not just what are you trying to do, but what are we trying to accomplish, right? So it's one thing to be able to say, okay, I know what the interest rate is on the T-note, but what's this particular person trying to solve, right? Are they an institutional banker? Because that's a very different sort of person than so that I can figure out how much my credit card interest rate is going to go up, or how, whether I need to hedge against inflation differently, or whatever it might be, right? So there's different populations that care about that number for different reasons.
Yeah, and
so
I'm thinking. Sorry,
go ahead.
I'm thinking about as this. There's a lot of flexibility, right? And it's by design. We've talked about this with Matthias Vukuzic on the SAFE document, the Y Combinator SAFE document, that there's this, in software development, there's this favoring for speed, right? You got to be able to move. But I'm thinking about quality, right? This is an issue that the lawyer is supposed to care about, ensuring that what's delivered is any good, especially because, as we talked about with Martin, software can break things, can break a lot of things. So looking down at 3.2, there's a section called List of Deliverables with Quality Assurance Surveillance Plan, which sounds scary. And it talks about making sure that the code is tested, properly styled, accessible, because it's, it's a block that's got to mix in with a bunch of other things. So talk to me about that quality assurance piece.
Yeah, so this is another one of the sort of core features of an Agile team or an Agile development shop that is different than traditional. So thinking back, right, in the pre-2000 software era, which is still true in a lot of software shops, although I think less and less common, is this idea that, okay, you've got the scope, and then you've got these software developers, and if the contract says that you have to deliver scope, right, a certain amount of lines of code that do a thing, then all the focus on the delivery team was on the quantity of code that they had to deliver, right? Or the quantity of features that they had to deliver. Right. And when timelines started to get compressed, which they inevitably did, right? Because projects always take longer than you think. Then what was happening is that the quality assurance phase of the project at the back end was getting cut. Mm. And so now you had this problem where you might be delivering lots and lots of lines of code, but it was buggy as heck, and it didn't always solve the problems that you're trying to do. And so one of the cornerstones is sort of the concepts of Agile teams is that they are cross-functional. So instead of saying, okay, we're going to start with user experience design, and then we're going to move into development and coding, and then we're going to move into quality assurance, and then we're going to integrate. An Agile team will have all of those roles thrown together on the same team, right? And so the idea is that quality assurance will be happening almost in real time alongside the developer. In fact, there's one of the sort of Agile methodologies is known as paired programming, where you could literally have two developers sitting at the same monitor, right, pre-COVID, but even, connected through a webcam or whatever, working on the same lines of code at the same time, which lawyers is like, oh my God, I could never, double bill a client for that. And spoiler, I have convinced legal teams to use paired programming, and it works really well, but that's a different thing than this. What that is real-time quality assurance, right? You have basically one person that is coming out and solving the problems, and another person kind of double checking it real time. And if they come up with something and they're not, chuck it out and they can solve for it right then and there. And it doesn't create an additional handoff down the road, which inevitably creates delays and so on.
Yeah, and I'm, as we talk about this, I'm always eager to pull it out to general principles, to be able to say to lawyers who are dealing with these kinds of contexts, how do you know how to figure out what matters for your particular context? So thinking about the lawyer who is either drafting a document like this or is interpreting a document like this, what's the principle, right? Not how do you make sure that you're including the kind of language everybody wants the lawyer to get out of the way while you're making the deal, but wants the lawyer to have CYA'd the whole time once the deal is broken, right? So how do you balance that in this kind of document?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that the first most important step for a lawyer, certainly when delivering or when tasked with either drafting or reviewing a technology contract, although one of the things about Agile is that it has jumped the gates now, right? It is used in far more context than just technology. Right. So you need to know from your client, what project management methodology are we following here? Because if it's a waterfall traditional project, then you're going to need one set of contract templates and terms and assumptions. And if it's Agile, then you definitely need an Agile contract with Agile terms and Agile assumptions. And if you try to shoehorn one into the other in either direction, then you're going to create some real headaches for your client down the road.
Right.
Higher level, I mean, different from that very practical thing. I think that, and obviously this is near and dear to my heart because it's what I've been teaching for so long. But I think there is a lot that lawyers can learn from the Agile methodologies and the Agile world about rapid delivery of value, this idea of real-time quality assurance and making sure that it's built in from the get-go. And eventually, that can get into using templates and automations, but that's not where it starts, right? It very much starts with coming up with a clear definition of who is the user, right? And it may be who is my client, who is my customer, whatever, and what is the problem they're trying to solve. And just starting there, because if you can answer those questions with a reasonable level of clarity, now all of a sudden you're solving problems and not just delivering widgets in the form of legalese packed contract language.
Yeah, and we've talked about, we could open a Pandora's box and question whether hourly billing is a Agile pricing structure without actually using any kind of Agile project management. But I don't want to get too nerdy about that. And what I would say, what I would say to anybody who's watching is, if you're dealing with technology context with your clients, you have a requirement for a certain level of competency. Don't simply go into these kinds of contracts and feel like, I know contracts, I could do this. Yes, you're going to have to learn some terms that are uncomfortable and some context that's uncomfortable, because you have to adapt to that decision maker's business context. So, John, if people want to reach out to you or learn more about this sort of Agile contract context, what's the best way to connect with you?
I am at agileattorney.com. That's where you'll find most of the important stuff. I'm on Twitter. I'm at JEGrant3 on Twitter. And you can find me on LinkedIn and most of the rest of the socials. There is an Agile Attorneys Facebook group that's not terribly active, but when people ask questions, I answer them. So reach out.
Well, we'll put links to all of that in the show notes. All you have to do is go to lawinsider.com/resources. You'll see it there, as well as a link to this document from the government's Agile contract recommendation. And also, if you want to be a guest on the Contract Teardown Show, just email us. We are at community@lawinsider.com. We'll see you guys at the next Contract Teardown. Thanks again, John.
Yep, thanks. Good to see you, Mike.